It's the end of the Ice Age. You're standing on a mudflat in what is now Utah. The air is cold. The marsh smells like wet reeds. A fire crackles in front of you. Duck bones are piling up beside it. Someone reaches into a small pouch. Inside are seeds. Bitter, dark, and strange. They're not food. You can't eat them. But they're about to change how this person feels. This moment will sit buried for 12,300 years. No one will know it happened. Until a team of archaeologists finds 4 tiny black seeds in the ash. And rewrites the timeline of human history. You have no idea what's about to happen next. Neither do they. Today, if you want nicotine, you walk into a gas station. You hand over a few dollars. You get a warning label. You know exactly what's inside. Science tells you the risks. There's a whole industry built around managing exactly how strong the hit will be. Back then, none of that existed. No labels. No studies. No internet telling you what nicotine does to a brain. No dosage chart. No packaging. No warning of any kind. Just a plant. A fire. And a hunter-gatherer figuring it out by feel. They had no way to know if it was safe. They didn't know if it would help them or hurt them. They tried it anyway. And that single decision, repeated by strangers across thousands of years, built an entire piece of human culture from scratch. Here's the first problem archaeologists face with a topic like this. Tobacco doesn't preserve well. Leaves rot. Smoke disappears. So how do you prove someone used it 12,000 years ago? You can't just look for the plant. You need chemistry. Researchers use a method called residue analysis. They search for nicotine, the signature chemical in tobacco. It shows up in old pipes, in ceramic jars, even in human hair and teeth. Sometimes it even shows up in the walls of the container itself, soaked deep into the clay. And remarkably, it survives. One early study, back in 1960, found nicotine in a pipe from the 7th century. That's over 1,000 years old. The chemical was still there. Nicotine, it turns out, is stubborn. It clings to stone and clay for centuries. So the science works. But there's a second problem. For decades, the oldest confirmed tobacco use was only about 3,300 years old. That evidence came from a stone pipe in Alabama, found at the Flint River site. Researchers dated it using animal bones found beside it. The bones were between 1685 and 1530 BCE. That's roughly 3,300 to 3,600 years ago. The pipe was carved from limestone, shaped like a straight tube. It looked a lot like a chillum, the kind of pipe still used in parts of India today. Scientists nicknamed it a medicine tube. Inside they found nicotine residue. Solid proof of tobacco use. They also found something unexpected. Traces of vanillin and cinnamaldehyde. Those are the same compounds behind the flavor of vanilla and cinnamon. In other words, this tobacco wasn't just smoked. It was flavored, thousands of years before anyone bottled a scented cigar. But that discovery left a strange gap. Decorative smoking pipes show up in the archaeological record even earlier. Some date back 3,000 to 5,000 years. Yet no one could prove what was actually being smoked in them. Was it tobacco? Something else entirely? No one knew. Which brings us to problem 3. If tobacco was being used before pipes existed, how would we ever find it? The plant itself had to survive. Untouched. Unburned. For thousands of years. That seemed almost impossible. Until someone found seeds instead of smoke. In 2015, archaeologist Darren Duke was digging in Utah's Great Salt Lake Desert. He found a hearth. Just a small black smudge in the mud. His team named it the Wishbone Site. The name came from duck wishbones scattered around the fire. Nearly 2,000 duck bones were found there in total. This wasn't a random discovery. People had gathered here to hunt and eat. Stone spear points were scattered nearby too, the kind used for hunting large game. The hearth had burned willow wood, likely the best fuel available nearby. Radiocarbon dating placed it at 12,300 years old. That made it one of the oldest open-air sites in the American West. Back then, this desert wasn't a desert at all. It was marshland sitting along a channel called the Old River Bed. Cooler. Wetter. Full of birds and open water. A good place to stop, hunt, and rest during a long seasonal journey. These people weren't settled. They were moving with the seasons, camp to camp. And somehow, tobacco was already part of that journey with them. But the real surprise came later. Buried in the ash were 4 small charred seeds. They belonged to a wild desert plant called Nicotiana attenuata. In plain terms, wild tobacco. This pushed back the known use of tobacco by 9,000 years. Duke's team published the findings in Nature Human Behavior in 2021. Now here's the clever part of the evidence. Tobacco seeds don't burn well. They're a poor source of fuel. So why were they in a fire pit? Researchers believe they weren't fuel at all. They were leftovers. The tobacco was likely chewed, not smoked. Someone extracted the nicotine, then spit or discarded the seeds into the fire. That single detail tells us this was deliberate, not accidental. Someone knew what this plant did to the body, and they wanted that feeling on purpose. This species of tobacco was never even domesticated. It's called coyote tobacco, and it still grows wild in that same region today. Indigenous communities in the area use it to this day. Here's what's striking. True tobacco farming didn't start for thousands more years. Domestication happened later in the American Southwest, the Southeast, and Mexico. Some researchers even argue tobacco may have been among the first plants people ever managed. Not because they needed it to eat, but because they wanted more of what it gave them. Now let's fast forward. By around 700 AD, tobacco shows up again. This time in Maya territory. Archaeologists studied a small ceramic flask from southern Campeche, Mexico. Painted on the outside were Maya hieroglyphs. They read Huayotlayume. Translation: the home of its tobacco. Researchers tested the inside using mass spectrometry. They found nicotine. A near-perfect match to the label. It was only the second time a Maya vessel's contents matched its own hieroglyphic text. For the Maya, tobacco wasn't just recreational. It was medicinal. Used to treat bug bites and skin ailments. It was practical. Burned as a snake repellent. And it was spiritual. Painted onto temple walls held by gods and kings. One Maya wall relief at the ancient city of Palenque shows a deity known as God Al. He's smoking a cigar. Another vase from the same era shows a monkey deity smoking a cigarette. A surviving book called the Madrid Codex tells a similar story. It's one of the few Maya texts to survive Spanish conquest. It shows multiple scenes of people smoking. For centuries, all archaeologists had were these images. Paintings. Carvings. Stories passed down. They could see tobacco in Maya art. They just couldn't prove it chemically. The Campeche flask changed that. It gave the paintings physical proof. At the Maya site of El Baúl in Guatemala, researchers found something rarer still. Ceramic vessels containing liquid tobacco. Not smoked. Not chewed. Consumed as a drink. This method was far more dangerous. Liquid tobacco is highly toxic. It could easily be lethal in the wrong dose. Researchers believe it was used in sacred, high-stakes rituals. Possibly to induce visions. Possibly during childbirth or sacrifice ceremonies. Meanwhile, along the Pacific coast of North America, another culture had its own relationship with the plant. In what's now Northern California, hunter-gatherers were smoking tobacco through stone pipes. Scientists at UC Davis tested pipe fragments from Toloa ancestral land, near the Smith River. They confirmed tobacco use dating back to at least 860 AD. Detecting it wasn't easy. Ancient tobacco was weaker than today's crop. Less than 2% nicotine compared to 4 to 8% in modern tobacco. So the researchers had to develop an entirely new extraction method. One that pulled residue directly from the stone itself, without damaging the pipe. Their results confirmed it. Real tobacco. Really smoked. Over 1,000 years ago. This was significant for another reason too. These were not farmers. They were hunter-gatherers. That meant tobacco use didn't require agriculture to spread. It moved through trade, ritual, and word of mouth. Long before anyone planted a single seed on purpose. Here's what all of this adds up to. Tobacco may be one of the very first plants humans ever managed on purpose. Not for food. Not for survival. But for how it made them feel. Duke, the archaeologist behind the wishbone discovery, put it simply. He said people were already managing tobacco long before farming existed. Long before wheat. Long before corn. Long before rice. This flips a common assumption about early humans. We tend to picture them as purely practical. Focused only on food and shelter. Hunting. Gathering. Staying warm. Staying alive. But the wishbone seeds tell a different story. These were people who had already met their basic needs that day. They had duck meat cooking. They had fire. They had shelter nearby. And in that moment of safety they reached for something else entirely. Something that offered no calories. No warmth. No protection from predators. Just a feeling. That single choice says something enormous about being human. Even 12,300 years ago, survival wasn't the whole story. People were already asking a different question. Not just, how do I live? But, how do I want to feel while I'm alive? And look at where that question led. It led to seeds tucked in a pouch on a freezing marsh in Utah. It led to flavored tobacco pipes in Alabama, laced with vanilla and cinnamon. It led to sacred vessels in Mexico, painted with the names of gods. It led to dangerous, liquid rituals in Guatemala, reserved for the most important ceremonies a community could hold. Different continents, different centuries, different languages entirely. But the same plant, the same pull. That's rare in archaeology. Most trends fade or stay local or vanish without a trace. Tobacco didn't. It kept resurfacing again and again independently across thousands of years, which suggests something about the plant itself, and something about us. We are a species that seeks out altered states, not by accident, on purpose, consistently, for as long as we've kept records, and apparently for thousands of years before that too. So picture that hearth again. The duck bones, the cold marsh air, the small pouch of seeds. That person by the fire wasn't just surviving the Ice Age. They weren't thinking about archaeologists or chemistry or a video made 12,300 years later. They were doing something almost nobody gives ancient humans credit for. They were experimenting, curious, reaching for a plant with no guarantee of safety, just to see what it would do. No one taught them that. No warning label existed to stop them. They figured it out the only way anyone ever really does. By trying it. 12,000 years later, we're still doing the same thing. Different plants, different rituals. Same restless human curiosity. The fire is long gone. The seeds turned to ash. But that impulse, the one that made someone reach for the unknown, never burned out at all, is still sitting right there inside every one of us.